We're going to finish up with chapter 11 today, so pull out your workbooks. This will not be a terribly long video. In fact, I probably could have appended this to the chapter 10 web video lecture, but here we go. So chapter 11, chapter 11 concerns the way that we create new words from old. So the way that one way we can expand the vocabulary, obviously, is bringing in new words. But another thing that we can do is create new words from old, and we do so by several different methods. One is just creating a new word. Another is combining, taking elements we already have and putting them together to create new words. Shortening words that already exist, blending together words that already exist, and then sometimes shifting from one part of speech to another. So we'll start with creation, how we create words. There are really very few what we call root creations in the English language. A root creation is a word created just out of nothing, out of nowhere. Most words have some connection, some etymology, some reason. Exceptions that are true root creations, again, are rare. But one of them is the term Google. And yes, Google, like when you're using the internet, that Google spelled differently is related. But the original term Google is a mathematic term. And in the 1940s, the mathematician who came up with this concept for this very large number needed a name for it. And at least the story is that he commissioned his 9-year-old to come up with a name for this new mathematical concept that he had created. And the 9-year-old nephew came up with the term Google. And there you go. Nylon, similarly, is what we call a true root creation. Exercise 11.2, I don't think I assigned this one, but it has you look at some true root creations. Sometimes trade names, which may or may not be root creations, are created and they become common. So that Xerox, for example, we use that kind of just generically for making copies. But Xerox originally was a trade name. So it is both a good thing and a bad thing for a company if their trade name becomes generic this way, if it becomes a common noun. It's good in that, especially initially, it's a lot of attention that everyone associates copy machines with Xerox. But then over time, it can reduce the strength of that trade name. 11.3, there's a list of words that were originally trade names. Some still are. Band-Aid is a trade name, but you can buy Band-Aids that were made by other companies, and we still call them Band-Aids. Levi's, some people kind of called all jeans, at least for a while, Levi's. Tabasco, as in Tabasco sauce, that was a trade name rather than just the general name. Coke, which we've talked a little bit about already. In the South, some people call all soft drinks Cokes. And there's some other examples as well. Let's see. The ones that we have in 11.3 ask us to look at the existing words or elements. So Coca-Cola combined in words that we already have, so it also blended. And one of those it's cocaine from the coca flower seed. And then cola was already in the language. Band-Aid came from bandage and then aid. Let's see, Pepsodent came from Pepsin, and then dent is the word for tooth. Shouldn't have picked that one. And you can look through the rest of these and see the earlier form that might underlie the trade name. So trade names. A third way is echo words. So echo words can make their way into the language. Onomatopoeic words can sometimes become just more standardized. It has been argued that there are no true echo words. And I think in the very beginning of the semester, I showed you guys a video that talked about how animal sounds differ from one language to another. But at any rate, this is another way new words can be created. So this is the ejaculation theory of how language originated. Was the idea that some caveman way back in time dropped a stone on his foot and said something like "ow," and that then began speech. It became a word. We didn't really look a lot at those theories early on because there's not a lot of credence we can put in any of them. But at any rate, echoic words, gurgle, hee-haw, hiccup, those can be added into the language. Similar to echoic words are what are called symbolic words, and those are words that share a common meaning and a common sound. And I do believe I gave you some of 11.4, number 2 here for homework. But for an example, let's see, tweak, twiddle, twinkle, and twist. They all have to do with twisting in a sort. Likewise, if you look at glare, gleam, glimmer, glint, glisten, they all have that GL sound, and sure enough, they all have a somewhat similar meaning that has to do with something. I won't give that one away. And then lastly, ejaculations can become part of the language, like ha-ha, sounds like that can then kind of mainstream into the language, and 11.5 talks you through that. Okay, so we also can combine elements we already have. Again, there's overlap with these categories, but one of the biggest ways is through affixation, through adding prefixes and suffixes to create new words. And let's see, 11.6, is the first to deal with this concept of combining, and then we have 11.7. And 11.8, and I believe I give some of you these for homework. But it's the way we create words. So, for example, the word blog, itself a blend, came into our language not all that long ago. And then later, we added an ER to it. We added a suffix, and you could be a blogger. And then something could be bloggerish or bloggy. You can reblog. Or unblog or hyperblog. And so by affixing or adding prefixes and suffixes, we were able to take that word blog and do other things with it. Turn it into, turn it into a verb, or turn it back into a noun, turn it into an adjective or an adverb, bloggishly. So that's another way that we can enhance our language to suit changing society. So compounds, remember back when we were looking at Old English, that compounds were the major way that the Anglo-Saxons increased their vocabulary, and it's still the major way that we increase our vocabulary. Words like jet ski, cell phone, cyberspace, those are all relatively recent additions to the language, and they're all compounds. If you've ever wondered, when is it two words, when is it hyphenated, and when is it a single word? Well, that kind of shows us that evolution. So that usually we start out with two words. So when cell phones first were being a thing, it was cell phone. And then you might have seen it hyphenated for a while, and then it just merged cell phone into a single word. Let's see. So that is going to be 11.10 talks about spelling. And by the way, I should back up here a minute. 11.7 talks about, number one, the prefixes and suffixes and where they come from. And most of ours are from Greek, Latin, or their Old English in their origins. And then 11.7, number 2, shows us that you have to be careful with prefixes and suffixes because sometimes they can look alike but not be alike. So amoral and aside, A is the prefix in each, but it means something different. A in amoral means not moral. A in aside means to the side. So be aware of that. So we've affixed, we've got compounding. 11.11 talks about the stress of compounds. So a mad housekeeper is different than a mad housekeeper. And so part of the ways that we convey meaning is through stress or through emphasis. When my son was growing up, he didn't like the way I said bean soup. He said it's bean soup, not bean soup. And he always claimed that I didn't do that compound right. And so that does actually kind of affect meanings. But my favorite compounding is what's called an amalgamated compound. And that is 11.3. And I think I have you do some of these, and you'll have to go to the OED for some help with many of these. But these are words that used to be compounds, but they have melded together to the point that we don't recognize them anymore as compounds. So nostril, if you're reading Chaucer, it was a nose thyrla, and a thyrla meant an opening. And you had eye thyrlas and ear thyrlas. But nose thyrla amalgamated. It became a single word so that most people would never know that used to be a compound. Daisy was days eye. Doff, like to doff your hat, was to do off. Nickname was an eka nama, which was eka meant other. So it was an other name. And then we also had juncture displacement that we learned about earlier on. So it was an eka, and then it became a neka nama, and then a nickname. Gossip was god, which meant good, and then ship was friend. So a gossip was a good friend. I think I gave away a few of these, but if you look through 11.13.1 and 2, it will show you some other examples, and I think I have you do some of those. Okay, so the next process is through shortening. We can simply shorten forms we already have. 11.14 takes us through this, so some words we don't even realize that they used to be longer words. Cinema was cinematography. Chat comes from chatter. Prom comes from promenade. Radio, I can't remember the full one. Radio telephony. I can't even say it. So it's the same word. We just shorten it, and the shortened version makes its way into the language. Usually we build words we start with a component like blog, and then we can make it blogger, and we add on, we build on, but sometimes the reverse happens. So we start with a larger word, and then we peel away elements to make a smaller word. Escalator, we had the word escalator first, and then we came up with escalate by taking off that ending. The word babysitter came before the verb babysit. So it was a noun first, and then we took away the ER ending and we turned it into a verb. And that is called a back formation, where instead of building onto a word to create a new word, we take away from a word. So 11.16 gives you some other examples here of back formations. And then let's get that out of the way. Initialisms. So initialisms and acronyms are different. An initialism is an umbrella term, and it can include what we call alphabetisms, like TV, RSVP, IQ, AT&T. My daughter is graduated from the Air Force Academy. She's now an officer in the Air Force. And any of you, if you have military family or you're military, the military is full of initialisms and acronyms. So anacronyms. I can't even talk today. I'm going to keep trying. Acronyms. Acronyms occur when an alphabetism becomes a word itself. So my daughter graduated from the United States Air Force Academy, and they called it USAFA. Snafu is a military term. If something's a difficult situation, and originally it was situation, normal, all. I'm just going to say fouled up. Futhorg, that's the word for the runes that Old English scribes used, and it had to do with the first and last letter of the runic alphabet. Scuba, I can never remember exactly. Underwater breathing apparatus. I messed up on the first part there. So those what initialisms are when we form words based on alphabetisms. And when those alphabetisms can form a word themselves, then we get an acronym. So be sure you have those terms straight. And then let's see. Oh, blending. I like blending. Blending is a fun one. So blending occurs when we take elements we already have and put them together, like smog is smoke and fog, brunch is breakfast and lunch, simulcast is simultaneous and broadcast, and then a funny one that maybe pertains to Savannah around St. Patrick's Day, an alcoholiday. So it's formed deliberately. Amalgamated compounds like nostril and daisy, they don't occur on purpose, but somebody thought alcoholiday was cute, and they came up with it, and it came to be popularized. So related to blending is what's called a folk etymology. And a folk etymology is a mistake, really. But it results from a mistake, a naive misunderstanding or a false etymology of a foreign or difficult expression. So chaise lounge is an example. It was chaise longue. I think I've talked about that one. The word rosemary comes from a Latin word. It has nothing to do with roses or the name Mary. I grew up calling your dresser drawers. We would say dresser drawer, or we would say chester drawer, and it was a chest of drawers. But it's this naive misunderstanding, and then it kind of becomes mainstream. Not in these parts, but in northern areas where there's a lot of snow, artificial snow was sometimes called Archie Fisher snow. So these can be quite funny. 11.19 has you look at some other folk etymologies. Cockroach is one. Let's see if it's listed. It isn't, but if anyone wants to take that one on, you can. So eponymy, trade names are related to eponymy, but eponymy happens when a name becomes commonized. And it can be like leotard was named, the leotard like gymnast wear. It was named after a gymnast whose last name was Leotard. Let's see. My daughter was also a gymnast, and so I know a lot of gymnastics terminology, and these are all gymnastics moves, and every one of them come from the name of gymnast. So she did a Maloney, she could do a Tkachev and a Jaeger, and all of those are named after gymnasts. So if a gymnast comes up with some new move, that gets named after them, and then sometimes, at least in the world of gymnastics, those are very mainstream terms. We have a few exercises on eponymy, and I have you do some of them, and they're fun. So sometimes it will come from, the common word will come from a proper name, like these gymnastics examples. 11.20 number 1 gives you other examples of that. Sometimes it's just an altered form of a name, like boysenberry. I think there was a botanist named Boysen. Let's see, 11.20 number 3, common words taken from literature, mythology, or the Bible. Ammonia is an example taken from a god. You can look up some of these. I think I have you look a few up. Let's see. Place names, Attic was from Attica, for example. Let's see. Current is named after the place Corinth. Sometimes common words are derived from names of national groups. Sometimes there are various other kinds of proper nouns. So I'll have you work some with 11.20. 11.21 is popularization. We've kind of talked about this before. When specialized speech and slang becomes popular. So blog at first probably was quite technical. Not everybody had a blog or knew what a blog was. And then it became popularized. So a lot of these terms are going to be terms that at least started out kind of technological in nature. A tendency, slang, of course, is just that kind of speech that's particular to a particular group, whether by age or oftentimes it can be by location, by what school you go to. So slang is kind of, especially among young people, deliberately created sometimes to keep older generations from understanding. I like that I teach because it kind of keeps me at least a little bit knowledgeable about slang. I can ask you guys, what does this mean? What does that mean? And you can help me out. The slang is always changing. It's always turning over, and it can become popularized and no longer, the specialized speech. One of the, I think we have an exercise, if not, I think I might do it in another class, where Webster's Dictionary gives a list of the newest words that they've come out with. And a lot of times they're slang words that then make their way into the language. Bro hug was a relatively recent addition. Man cave has been added in the past few years. So it used to be slang, and then it becomes popularized. Reduplication is just a tendency in slang. We'll say things like flip-flop, mishmash, even Steven, kind of rhyming or at least alliterating. And then finally, we have functional shift when one part of speech becomes another. And let's see, 11.23 deals with this. 11.23 number 2, I don't know if I gave you this, but I'll do a couple with you. Blemish, if you look it up in the OED, you'll see that originally it was a verb, but now we think of blemish more as a noun. And so sometimes we can add a prefix or suffix to a word, but sometimes nothing changes. The word itself just shifts from being a noun to being both a noun and a verb. Coin was originally a noun only, but now you can coin a term. It can be a verb to create something new. Eavesdrop, now we think of solely as a verb, but originally eavesdrop was only a noun. So functional shift can happen. And let's see where that takes us. You know what? That takes us to the end. I highly recommend, before you try the quiz on these chapters, 10 and 11, that you look at 11.25 and give it a go. It's a great review, and see what you can do with it. Okay, so that's a wrap. I hope you all have enjoyed this web video lecture. I think this section of the class is really a lot of fun here at the very tail end. All right, everyone. Thanks so much. Have a great day. Bye-bye.